you have to negotiate your salary. And you see, a lot of times, because I have sat in positions where either I've been on a board or a CEO, the people who negotiate their salaries manage to push them up. And there are those who just accept them. Because normally HR, as you've said, might play the gikomba. They'll give you because it's a range, they'll give you the lower part of the range. So you always have to negotiate. So those are some of the things even a career site will do. How do you negotiate your salary? How do you push back? How do you, and the biggest culprits, even from what I have seen, unfortunately in a number of cases, would be my gender, because they won't push back. I've seen a lot of gentlemen come in the middle of the year and tell me, I want to have a discussion about my salary, more than you would have.
In the African culture, that would be considered rude.
And unfortunately, if you negotiate and you show value, because you're not also just negotiating, you've demonstrated the value you're adding in the company. And if you're able to negotiate, you get a better deal.
It's not from a point of emotions that I deserve.
It's a value.
It's a point of value.
It's a value. It's a point of value.
And you must know.
You must know your value. And that's why one of the things we do is train people. How do you package your value? What is your value?
So you give us a hint, a taste of the career side.
How do you package your value?
Our audience, give us a taste. How do you negotiate? How do you package your value? Please allow me to interrupt your viewership for something that I believe should be classified as a matter of life and death. Hear me out. Security should never be a cause for panic in whichever part of the country that you live in. Alafu, being safe should also not be expensive. Now, hiyo pia does not mean that you compromise in quality, especially when dealing with security personnel. And that's why I want to talk to you about K9 Alligators, a security company that recruits exclusively from the NYS. And on top of the paramilitary training that the officers get from the National Youth Service, K9 Alligators tops that up with additional training with some of the world's finest security personnel, some of whom have trained with some of the top creme de la creme special forces units in different parts of the world. And that's not all. With K9 Alligators, you don't just get a security officer. You get a professional trained with high-level security training and vocational skills. That is, you get a security officer who also is a certified plumber. You get a security officer who is also a certified electrician. And the good news is you can also make custom requests. K9 Alligators is registered with PSRA and also offers a wide range of security services, including VIP, close protection services, security dogs on need basis, as in uko na boma na hauhitaji hustle ya kukuwa na umbwa mchana, ama unaogopa madogi kama mimi, you can have lethal, highly trained security dogs deployed to your home with a handler overnight or on need basis, and all this you will get at very competitive rates. Please get in touch with the numbers on your screen or click the link in the description below. Now that you feel safe already, si tunaweza endelea na conversation. Hey wadau, kama kawaida, tukistumble on good vibes, lazima tulete submissions to the table. And our guest for this episode is an advocate of the High Court, a lawyer by training, as I had her describe herself. Ukiniuliza, I believe, this is mine, that if you did a prompt on AI, ChatGPT, ama whichever you're using, useme, can you summarize the corporate world, business, manufacturing, law into a lady? The result will be our guest for this episode, Phyllis Wakiaga. I stand corrected if nimekosea kitu. Last I checked, first of all, karibu sana.
Asante, thanks Kimori.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Last I checked in my kutafuta information hapa na pale, because we've been trying to set this up for a while.
Yes.
You were doing your PhD.
Yes, I was.
And that's years ago.
I started it in 2018 or 19. So I'm still doing it. I'm at the tail end now. So I'm waiting for seminar 2. You normally do 4 seminars.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did the coursework for 2 years. Then COVID happened, dragged us out, and then started the research. Then you have to do the research, you have to do the proposal, do the findings. So I'm waiting to be slotted for a seminar 2 presentation, which is, some of the presentations you have to go through. Yeah. So hopefully by end of year, I'll be done. Asante. Then I can be a doctor like you.
Haters watakuwa na field day na hiyo man.
Sindio?
You can be a doctor.
I can be a doctor like you.
That goes on record.
Exactly.
Don't edit that. Good vibes. Very good vibes. I'm happy finally, we've been able to do, we are doing this.
We're doing it finally. You've been
Yes,
asking for a while.
Yeah. So now, tarudi nyuma kidogo, I believe kwa media, maybe if, unless I'm wrong, you are associated with your last position. Of course, you've held several positions and you've aced them. And I believe that can be qualified by the fact that, in fact, as I wrote articles, former Kenya Association Manufacturers CEO lands another plum job. So there are people who would wish to worship the God you worship, but will take them through the process.
Like
But hapo kwa Kenya Association of Manufacturers, you were there. Like kwa media, we saw you there for a bit, okay? Now, let me lay a scenario for you, because that's one of my biggest areas of interest, manufacturing.
Yes.
So we have a friend of ours, a friend of the show, Mudi. He came to the show.
Yeah.
And I'm big on creating employment, and you've also had a stint kwa HR.
Yes,
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
But hapo kwa manufacturing, after high school, they get some capital from their parents. It's an episode we covered.
Okay.
And they start a soap business.
Okay.
It's an informal thing that goes on where ati you tengeneza soap, like liquid soap, and then you sell it informally kwa kibuyu. And I was like, this sounds like a good idea if it only it was structured.
Yeah.
They did branding and stuff.
Yeah.
Would, from your experience, with the little information I've provided, would they qualify as manufacturers?
No, thanks for that information, and first of all for the compliment of where you know me from. I did work at the association for 9 years and was the face of it, so probably that's why that sticks with you. But now to your question, manufacturing is value addition. So if you're adding value to a product, if for example you take groundnuts, you fry them and you pack them, that's value addition. So that value addition to the soap that you've talked about. So they probably buy the chemicals, put them together, put them in that jerry can. That's value addition. So it counts as manufacturing. The thing is whether it then meets all the standards for it to be certified by, say, the Kenya Bureau of Standards. But you'll see people like around where I live, I see people actually selling that soap on the side of the road. They've made it and they've packed it. But there's then what you need to do for your product, say, to be certified. That way it can get to the supermarket shelves, it can be exported to the neighboring countries, then you can scale. So that is manufacturing, just at a smaller scale. And that's where most people start.
And without losing that train of thought, I saw that and I was like, this is an opportunity. And then when we come to the level of unemployment now, the number of graduates we churn out from universities every year, we've had a submission on this platform that if we had graduates coming together with such concepts and putting together structures to produce products, to put, let's call it value addition, to provide products that can be consumed locally. Like let's say someone amesoma biochemical engineering, someone else amefanya law, someone else amefanya marketing. They could form a company and have a product to be consumed locally.
That's true. And actually there's a role that also beyond them as individuals, either government or other institutions can play. Because what you've talked about is like business incubation. So when I start my business, someone like that, if they had an incubator, someone who takes them in, trains them even further, and that's the role of places like Kirdi. They can research on the product, what are the materials you're putting in, tell you this is the right formulation that you should use. And there are SMEs who actually go to Kirdi and get that type of support. Then you get a space which can incubate you. That was the role of, say, the Kenya Industrial Estates, where you can go, they give you a small space, you make your product from there until your SME grows, and then you're able to move out. So people like that coming together, the role of governments in some cases is to incubate such businesses. In some cases, they can even provide common manufacturing platforms, which are common user facilities. So you have a factory where I come and make my product, say, from 9 to 10. Someone else comes 10 to 11. Because as an SME, they might not be able to do the setup, like buy all the machinery and everything. But the ability to create things like common user facilities where people can share the cost and you only pay for the time you need to use it. Those are some of the platforms that can incubate businesses like that.
And you also, if I get this correctly, you've played around policy kidogo.
Yes, I
and
have.
This is why I've been excited
Yes,
to
I
have
have.
this conversation. You've played around policy kidogo.
Yes.
So before we dig deep kwa hii kidogo, twende kwa
Yes.
policy. I heard someone say, or I read somewhere, that let's talk value addition.
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of mangoes in Ukambani.
Yes.
But apparently, at the residents cannot add value to the mangoes, come up with a mango juice manufacturing plant, because they would become a threat to the existing systems of the more established companies that are already doing that.
I don't think that's true, because there are many people who start their businesses as SMEs, and I've seen a lot of SMEs who make products that are made by bigger companies. There are people making crisps, for example, and still competing with tropical heat. So nothing in policy stops anyone, no matter how small they are, from producing, even if they are larger players. So I think that's probably a misconception.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ningeenda deep into that, but turudi hapa kwa manufacturing.
Yes.
As someone who's been in that industry for a bit,
Yes.
how much does manufacturing, how much can manufacturing go in reducing unemployment? Where are we going?
I think manufacturing goes a long way, because in manufacturing, you create a lot of jobs. And in countries that have been able to scale production and scale manufacturing, there's a big opportunity for job creation. And in today's world, where the digital economy has also come in, there's the whole angle of servicification of manufacturing, where manufacturing is using digital tools, technology. So it's merging very closely with the services industry. So the spill-off effect, meaning the jobs created beyond manufacturing, is almost sometimes even ×9. From a manufacturing job, you're able to create jobs in, say, transports and logistics. You're able to create jobs in IT because of the systems being used. You're able to create jobs in wholesale and retail because those products have to be sold somewhere. So it has a big multiplier effect. So that's why you hear it said that manufacturing is the way to go, because of its ability to multiply the jobs it creates. But it doesn't discount the fact that services is also a field. And that's why the servicification of manufacturing is a big conversation now. That
Servicification of
manufacturing, meaning the thing I've said, that manufacturing is closely linked to services. So if you grow manufacturing, you're also growing services.
Okay.
So say, for example, you're producing products, as I've explained, you're producing juice, the example you gave.
Yes.
If I'm producing juice, I have to make the juice. Someone has to transport it. That's a service industry. So you're growing the service industry. If you're using technology in your farm, someone has to make, say, the digital platform that will be used to either manufacture your products or put the excise stamps. So there's someone doing some service that will contribute to manufacturing. When you're transporting the goods, when you're going to wholesale, retail, all those are services sectors. So that's what it means, that manufacturing is beyond manufacturing. It grows manufacturing, but also grows other sectors alongside it. If you even go back to agriculture, because a lot of these products, a country like ours, we are an agricultural country. So you'll find, like the product you've said, mango, it's come from the farm. So if you're able to process more and export more, farmers can grow more. So you have forward and backward integration. So it integrates with the farmer benefits. It integrates with the forward, which is the services, the people ahead in the value chain. Yeah, so it's an amazing sector in my view, because it's also able to carry along many other sectors.
I like the use of the word amazing, and you paint a very rosy picture of manufacturing. So in your time in the sector, I'll give 2 examples.
Yes.
We had a guest hapa anaitwa Joram.
Yes.
Joram so fire with nails production. Alisema this country.
What fire did he see?
He so fire. Alisema before you try, think twice.
What happened to Joram?
Joram invested heavily in manufacturing. Akasema this is not a country for manufacturers. And we're getting to, in your time in the industry, these are the challenges people faced.
What was his challenge?
His challenge was the cost of production in this country is unbearable. And the most recent example I can give is sugar. Apparently, it is cheaper to import sugar from Brazil than it is to produce sugar in Kenya. How do we get there?
Yeah. So the reality is, of course, the cost of production is a challenge. And that's why if you look at Africa, it's always been a big ambition to grow manufacturing, not just in Kenya, but even when you talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, A big part of the conversation is how do we grow the market so we can grow manufacturing. But the cost of production has been a prohibitor in many cases. Because if you look at manufacturing, you need a number of inputs to be able to produce. So say, for example, you need power. So the cost of power needs to be competitive, right? You need to transport your goods, meaning the cost of transport needs to be affordable. You need to have roads that you can transport your products on and everything. You need labor. So your labor also needs to be affordable. You need technology because for you to be competitive, you might find the country you gave as an example, they're using top of class technology to produce that sugar. So by the time they do it, competing becomes very difficult. So the issues of cost of production are a reality. And as you're saying, as your friend Joram tried and tested, they sometimes then become a big prohibition from people investing and growing in manufacturing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we were to break it down, kidogo, we bring it low
Yes.
kidogo. What's the place for someone aspiring to get into manufacturing? Are you able to paint a picture of the entry,
Yes.
the industry one would go for, and the likely challenge in terms of the process and possible results if it were to be a success?
It's very diverse, so unfortunately, I won't grant you that.
Let's say, for example,
so you'd have to
the so-called
zero
avocado.
down.
Let's say
Yes, zero
avocado.
down, yeah,
Let's
to a sector, yeah.
We have a friend of ours who broke down the example. I should have checked it, Kwanza.
Yeah.
You could actually make cooking oil from avocado, which is healthier than some oils that are being sold in the market.
That's true.
So if you were to go that direction,
Yes.
and you want to come up with a product that can qualify to enter the market.
Okay, you have to work backwards first because you have to start from your raw material, which is the avocado. Meaning you have to have offtake agreements with the farmers who have to plant the avocado to the standard required to make avocado oil.
Standard.
Yes, because probably not every avocado will produce the same quality of avocado oil. Yes. So that's why you'll find like people who are, say, working with farmers would give them a standardized product. So you'll find if you are planning to do avocados at scale, you would work with the farmers, produce the avocados, have a standard avocado that has been tested in the market and is known to produce the best avocado oil. So that's what you would get them grow. So then your raw material is standardized and is high quality. Then you produce, you find out what machinery is required for me to produce avocado oil. You import the machinery, or if it can be made locally, it's made locally. You make your avocado oil. But the end game is then the market, because you're not producing for yourself, you're producing for a market. So it's to determine, is my market domestic? Is it export? If it's domestic, am I doing it through the retail? Am I going to the hotels directly? Am I selling to individuals? So determining the market, because at the end of the day, you're producing a product for a market.
Yes.
And then as you're producing, also thinking, what is the cost of production? What do I need to factor in as my costs? What will my margin be? So it's a whole business case. Yeah, it's a whole system. So it's a case-by-case basis. But if there's a market and an interest for the product, there's always room to produce the product, market it, position it in the market, and sell it. And a lot of these products, if you look at the trade agreements that have been signed, for example, in the East African community, whether it's COMESA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, the Economic Partnership Agreements with Europe and the UK, within them, you can find products which are competitive. So you'll find maybe this product is duty-free to that market, so you have a competitive advantage to export. So you could then consider going to the export market.
Oh, yeah. So this idea that we have we have avocado spoiling in the farms,
yes.
It's just a fallacy and a blanket assumption that all avocados are ripe and are good for manufacturing.
Yeah, you'd have to verify that. But a lot of times I've seen the avocados that are being planted, most of them the target is to export. So most of those farmers have been given the seed to plant the avocado. So I assume that the quality in most cases is within the standard. Because, with this big, let's plant avocado for export, there's been a lot of support to the farmers in terms of giving them the right avocados. I think they're planting Hass avocados, or there's a specific brand that sells more in the export market. Yeah. So that's what they're actually doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, still up for agriculture, I got some very interesting stats.
Yes.
That up to between 40 and 60% of produce in agriculture goes to waste.
Yeah,
That's a
true.
very big number.
Yeah, it's true.
Is this by design? Because still in the same line, I see that in terms of economics, at some point, governments suppress agricultural production to avoid dealing with excess surplus, something of the sort.
I think that conversation has been had for many years because one of the big challenges is the issue of immediate value addition and also cold storage facilities. Because, for example, if you had, say, in a tomato growing area, a common user facility or a factory that could offtake tomatoes and produce tomato paste, you then don't have to worry about the tomatoes getting spoiled because they can be processed immediately. Or if you had cold storage facilities where we can take the tomatoes and freeze them or store them in a cold storage facility and preserve them for longer, then the waste doesn't happen. But as you've said, the 40 to 60% statistic that you've mentioned is because if you go to a county that produces some of those products, you won't find cold storage facilities, you won't find value addition. So it means that tomato must be used now. If you don't sell it, it ripens, and what happens to it? Eventually it rots and it becomes a waste.
Is this a system to identify opportunity in terms
of... It is a big system, yeah. Because cold storage is an opportunity on its own and value addition. Because imagine if you could buy the tomatoes from the farmers and you had a cold storage facility, you store all of them, and then when the market drops, because you know what happens, there's always that glut in the market where we have tomatoes and tomatoes are 5 shillings. Then suddenly tomatoes become 50 shillings one. So if you're able to have a cold storage, like now I'm giving you a business idea, Dr.
I'm following.
If you're able to find out where tomatoes are grown and where that waste is happening, or even mangoes, and then you invest, go to the bank, write a business case, build a cold storage facility. When they are in plenty, you buy, you store. And then you can keep them for longer. And when there's a downside in the market, you have product that can go into the market as opposed to it going to waste.
That sounds like hoarding.
It's not hoarding, it's preserving. Because if, for example, the market is flooded with 200,000 kilograms of tomatoes and the market can only absorb 50,000, and you don't store them, the 150,000 go to waste. So it's not hoarding, it's preserving.
A cabinet minister recently was threatening maize traders to release maize, or else he will import duty-free maize.
You see the difference with what you're talking about? That is being kept when there is a shortage in the market. I'm talking about when there is plenty in the market and you keep to preserve the product.
When there is plenty, it means you are creating a shortage.
No, it doesn't. No, when there is plenty in the market, say the market needs, there's plenty of supply and little demand.
And little demand.
Yes.
So what are you doing? You are holding, you are reducing.
But that's my point, Dr. Kingori, that the reason you build a cold storage facility is so that you don't put pressure for those things to be sold that month. They can be sold next month, the month after, because you're preserving them. But you see, if you're releasing all of them to the market at the same time, because say if it's tomatoes, if I don't sell my tomatoes this week, what will happen to them?
Go bad.
So I lose either way. But if I have a cold storage facility, I can preserve them for the next 3 months. Meaning I have supply, a sustained supply, as opposed to oversupply, because what oversupply does, as you're saying, the price drops if there's too much in the market.
Okay, I'm ashamed to admit that it is now that I've learned a very rude phrase in my community.
Which one is that?
Eat your tomatoes.
Eat your tomatoes.
It's like you're not going with them anywhere, so you can eat them.
You can eat them. But now you can go with them somewhere, you can preserve them. And in 6 months, we can still use them.
Okay. So when you look at manufacturing from that perspective, then let's go back kidogo.
Yes.
Right? It's value addition. There is ile waste. So first of all, we establish that if we don't have a strategy of production, we also cannot run away from. We cannot run away from the wastage, like the numbers of the stats between 40 to 60%. So is it that, because those numbers are there, because you'll hear in some parts of Mount Kenya, wanamwaga maziwa, they are pouring milk. And in other areas, as in pouring milk versus other areas buying a liter of milk for 100, 120, right? The packet milk 100 and 120.
That's true.
Right? So is our problem infrastructure? Is our problem strategy of connecting the markets to make sure we have a proper balance? What really is
all
our
that
problem?
put together, yeah. Because sometimes you'll find the place where the milk is selling at that high price is maybe northeastern Kenya.
Yes.
So maybe the infrastructure to take the product all the way is not what it should be. In some cases, you'll find the information is not moving. So the reasons you have given.
Or the 120 is the cost of getting the milk
Getting
from
it
where
there.
it is poured
Exactly. To there where it is needed. So it's all those things.
So what is your picture of like now the opportunities in Kenya? Because you've been in a place where you've worked with manufacturers, but you also see the unemployment, right? And you've also worked with policy manenos, right? Are there ideas that you feel if we implemented, we would tilt the scales kidogo in terms of opportunity?
I think eventually for strategic sectors, bringing down the cost of production. So we've discussed heavily the agriculture sector because Kenya is heavily an agricultural country. And if you're able to value add more of your products locally, you get more value. Say, take leather, for example. We, I think, have the largest or the second largest herd in Africa of cattle. And if you value add your leather, it becomes, the value increases times 10. So rather, if you value add leather. But you see, when you send it out as hides or wet blue, as they call it, so you just process, but you don't make the handbag, you don't make the shoe, you don't get that times 10. So the things that need to be
done. Assuming the whatever it's called,
yes,
leather, it's 1,000 bob.
Yes.
If you value add means turning,
producing a product like a handbag. So making products. Yes.
So you would now turn that 1,000 bob into 10,000.
Yes. By doing value addition.
This is the same way we hear that coffee will go or tea will go for 20 bob a kg.
Yes.
But then when it comes back, it's 1,000 shillings.
Exactly, because it's been value added. Yeah. Even for tea, and now just sticking to the point of what is then the opportunity. The opportunity is the amount that can be value added in the country. So take tea, for example, in Kenya. Only 3% of our tea is value added locally. And we are 3%. The largest exporter of tea in the world.
Only 3% is value added?
Locally.
And we are?
The largest exporter of roti, one of the largest exporters of roti. So there's a big opportunity there if more people could go into value addition of that tea. If, for example, we could attract one of the anchor investors globally who makes tea to set up in the country, you can then maybe value add 20% of it or much more.
Sijui kama I'll be dragging you into economics.
Yes.
But if we could please follow that thread kidogo, we entertain the idea of if we had, what does it look like? I'm not even dragging you into economics. This is your other area, international trade.
Yes.
You've covered international trade. What would a negotiation look like to bring an international company that value adds into Kenya to add value to tea rather than exporting raw tea in Kenya? Like, can we toy with the possible economic impact?
To who? To the country?
Kenyans, yes.
It would be positive because the tea is going raw anyway. So if you could do it here, it means you would have an industry here that's creating jobs here, that's paying taxes here. So it's positive to Kenya because it's going raw anyway.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring it again in another context.
Yes.
We have another guest who gave an example on our show. Andrew Modegitao, CEO wa AMG Realtors.
At CEO wapi?
CEO wa AMG Realtors.
Okay.
Yes. One of the finest, like legit, a real estate company that I wouldn't shy away from putting my name on.
Okay.
So he paints a picture of if we introduce a light rail system in Kenya, whereby we say have a light rail system that will make it possible to travel to Nakuru in 30 minutes, for example, right? It would make it possible for someone to work in Nakuru and commute to Nairobi. And this means it would open up the city,
yeah,
it would
that's
reduce the congestion,
Yeah.
and it would open up the economy there,
That's
such
true.
that the money someone lives with in Nairobi, he could create employment for 5 people in Nakuru,
That's true.
right? So
That's
just
true.
by that simple gesture of opening up transport, it opens such
The
opportunities.
economy, and yeah, it does. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we come back to the example of tea, and I believe we have tea, we have coffee. But in the same episode, he says that we are way past manufacturing. We should not look at manufacturing because there are countries who industrialized earlier, like China, who are doing dark factories now, whose automation process is way ahead. So if we try to catch up now, we may not, like, we may lose the game. Let's say, for example, in textile, people, when someone sees quality produced in China versus us deciding to industrialize now, we may lose the game before we even start. Is that plausible?
I think that debate has been held severally about whether people can jump and not necessarily go through the manufacturing phase and go into services fully. But the reality is, countries like, say, China, as an example, have moved to higher value-add products. So they are even looking for other places to locate factories that make products like textile products. And if you look at geopolitics, which I think is playing a big part also in where factories locate, the US is one of the big consumers, say, of textile products. And that's why we have the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act. And a lot of their products are produced in Asia. But they're looking to diversify markets because I think one of the things COVID has taught us and the geopolitics that has been happening is you have to diversify your sources. And when they look at diversification, they look at Africa because we have labor, the cost of production here can be cheaper from a labor angle. So a sector like apparel, the big cost is more of labor, so it's cheaper to produce here. And they are willing to do it sometimes even at a slight premium so that they diversify. They don't want to be over-dependent on one market. Because I think if anything has taught us, whether it's the war in Ukraine or COVID, that sometimes you don't want to over-rely on one market. So there's still an opportunity because countries are looking to diversify their sourcing. And that's a fact. Number two, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The largest working population into the future is going to be in Africa. Statistics have shown that we have the largest growing population, one of the largest in the world. So the market is going to be where? Here. So as long as we are able to grow people's purchasing power, if you produce in the continent, there's still an opportunity to serve the African market. So I wouldn't say that we are past, let's not manufacture. China is moving to more advanced things. They're looking for places also to diversify and produce. And that's why you're seeing investors looking at Africa and saying, let's consider investing in the continent. Thirdly, a lot of the raw materials exist in this continent. If we talk about the agricultural products, if you talk about rare earth, critical raw materials, they exist in the continent. So the opportunity to produce things here, even from a resource angle, makes a lot of sense. So it's just the investment, putting in the right technology, getting the right partners to partner with us, and even doing it on our own. We have locals who've set up factories successfully. Yeah, so I am a believer.
For your belief, don't lose that belief. Don't lose that belief. I like that you said that a place like China is looking for areas to set up their factories.
Yes.
Is it then practical, or is it possible to look at things from this perspective?
Yes.
We have a lot of Chinese investors into the real estate in Kenya.
Yes.
Which means they are coming to, they are targeting consumption more than production. Because the houses they are building, yes, they may sell them at a lower rate because they have access to cheaper loans, right? Then on the flip side, from a policy perspective, then does it mean that the opportunities change if we negotiated with China instead of importing what they're selling, like houses and let's say the SGR, for example?
Yes.
If we were to negotiate with China to build a phone factory in Kenya, for example, or a textile factory in Kenya, would that be a direction that gives us more advantage than the direction of being consumers?
Yes, definitely it does, and it's happening. There are a number of not just Chinese, but investors in Kenya, and Chinese investors who've come. For example, we used to import a lot of our tiles. Now there are tile companies making those tiles here. So a number of products that traditionally would be imported can be made in the country. I had the privilege of visiting SEZ in Ghana, where the entire SEZ is Chinese factories making different products. So some are making beds, some are making tiles, some are making different products, but they've set up shop there. They're employing people locally and making a difference in the local economy. So there's definitely room to collaborate and get more investors to produce those things locally. And even for local investors to do it. But the thing is yes, the differentiation between sometimes also the fiscal policy. Because at the end of the day, if you're able to bring in your raw materials at affordable prices, you can then compete in the market. But in a number of cases, you'll find the challenges you'll hear manufacturers talking about, where some of their products or their raw materials and the taxation levels, which make it cheaper to import a finished product than to produce locally. So if we're able to deal with some of those anomalies, I think it goes a long way in encouraging people to produce locally.
Thank you. I may have missed something.
Yes.
Tea, for example, if we, let's say value addition is 3% for the raw tea in Kenya, okay?
Full value addition, yeah.
Yes. When we export it, the market, when you export it, the people who are adding value addition,
yes,
they are adding value to sell it to their markets. Not like at they are adding value and then they bring us the finished tea.
Both ways. If you go to our shelves, you have both local tea and imported tea.
So does this mean that if we had the capacity for value addition of tea and coffee in Kenya, the Kenyan market can sustain manufacturing and the value addition profitably, locally?
You won't only be targeting the local market, you'll target both the local and international market.
So first of all, the local market alone cannot sustain?
No, it can't.
And then now...
The amount of tea we produce is a lot. So the local market can take quite a bit of it, but you need an export market.
Sawa. Yeah. And for the export market, you would now be faced with the challenge of marketing value-added tea to a market abroad. Could this be their disadvantage that makes it, as in that takes away the incentive to add value to the raw tea locally?
But that's why one of the things I said is get a big brand that already has the market. So that's not a challenge.
So the second way, direct.
So you set up like a big brand. I won't name brands, but a big brand that say has a big market in Pakistan. So if it produced some of its product here, they already have their channels, they already have a market. The second way to do it is to produce unbranded tea. So there's opportunity to produce unbranded tea here, and it's sold, say, in Harrods, in different outlets. So you're not then pushing a brand, you're pushing the tea that's packaged, yes, but you're then not having to deal with marketing costs. So there's levels where you can do it, where you can bring in an investor who already has a market, or locally you can produce, but you don't brand. And there's a lot of products where you then brand it, say, the name of Marks and Spencer, Harrods, or different brands. But you're not pushing your brand, it's their brand.
Okay. So in terms of, Sisi, we are very big on wealth creation.
Yes.
And there is real estate, sana consumption, stocks. We don't have companies that are stable enough. And I'm starting to get a vibe, if we don't work on manufacturing, for example, as one of the sectors, we may not have that many or a diverse portfolio to invest in or to have a stable stocks market, because I believe, let me give a Kienyeji submission, our balance of trade, of trade in terms of what we export versus what we import. We import more. Because it's easier. When you look at a locally made shoe, for example, a Kenyan who dares to dream. Like I have seen a lady who akona brand poa sana ya viatu inaitwa Pure Purple. Kenya locally made, okay? She produces very nice shoes.
Yes.
And a pair goes for, let's say, 20K.
Yes.
But then you have competition from the thrift market who are producing branded leather shoes, same quality by the way, but they will sell theirs at 10K. You can't compete. So have we been failed by policy in terms of promoting locally made, or locally made, going locally made is too ambitious? I'm pro locally made because it means the money circulates within our economy. This other one means we are exporting our money abroad. We are employing people abroad.
You're very clear about that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a fact.
What do you think it takes to change this? Is it policy or culture change?
It takes both. Policy in a big way, because that's what will bring down the cost of production. Because at the end of the day, even if I have a culture and I want to change my culture to buy a shoe and I can't afford it, I can't afford it. So even if I say I love Kenya and I can't afford, I can't. So both, because policy can help to bring down the cost of production, and then culture can help us to love what is ours. You know, because sometimes if we have that mind change that what is locally made, the value it's adding, the pride of having something that's made locally, that's amazing. But we also have to be able to afford it. So in my view, it's both ways. And then just jumping on to what you said earlier, manufacturing is definitely important, but so is digital economy, so is services. Because if you look at the youth today, there's a lot of creativity, even what you're doing. This is the digital economy where you're creating podcasts, you're posting them online. Hopefully you're making money. Hopefully you're making money. But you see, and I can see the number of people in the room, all these are jobs you're creating. So it's not just manufacturing, even the digital economy has opportunities. I've been doing work on tourism actually for the last 3 years in different countries in Africa. Tourism is also a big opportunity. And it's one of the sectors that's easy to grow quickly because already you have a destination. And what is unique about Kenya is different from what is unique about Tanzania. It's different from what is unique about Nigeria. So if you're able to position your tourism sector also and look at the opportunities in tourism, whether it's the MICE opportunities, whether it's the travel and leisure and the different products that you can create, tourism is another sector that can really grow an economy because it also has that same effect where you'll have people traveling, so the transport sector benefits, hotels, people are eating, agriculture is benefiting, you're uptaking manufactured products. So economic growth is diverse. And I think the beauty for Kenya is the diversified economy we have because we don't over-rely on one sector. Our economy is quite diversified.
Okay.
Tourism is big, manufacturing is also a sector, agriculture is a sector, wholesale, retail and trade, the real estate sector. So we have a good diversified economy. So it's an economy that if we give the right momentum, I think it can go places. And also we have people who are passionate, and I think all of us are hardworking. I find Kenyans extremely passionate about the things they do and very hardworking.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're an amazing population.
Let me put you on the spot.
Yes.
Tutarudi hapo kwa tourism, but I'll put you on the spot. You have been in the corporate sector for years,
Yes.
okay? But all we see is companies going down, going down. I'll give an example of something I don't understand.
Tell me.
It's an area you have been, you've actually worked in that sector. But I'll put you on the spot without putting you on the spot. It does not make sense to me, for example, for an airline to make losses in a country where other airlines are making profits. Okay? It does not make sense.
It doesn't, yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
So I'll give a background.
I'll come to you, yes.
I'll not mention names.
Yes.
We have done an episode understanding the transport sector, but for the planes of the road, matatus and buses. And we went back to the 1980s when they had the Nyayo bus.
Yeah.
And we had a case whereby it succeeded when Geoffrey Griffin ran it for a bit. And in the submission or in the course of the feedback or the information we had, Griffin had access to external funding. Yeah. All right. Yeah. He had access to external funding. The Nyayo bus, before it becomes a parastatal, was being run from the National Treasury. Yeah. The overheads were very low because they were only giving allowances to NYS
Yeah.
recruits and trainees
Yeah.
who are drivers and conductors.
Yeah.
All right? But it ran for a bit. Then when it was made a parastatal, it died an unnatural death. And to give context, I wonder whether we are cursed as a community, as a country, because the case is people would watch the cruise, the bus cruise, fighting in the evening over the money like they have made in the day.
Yeah.
But still, the author, Engineer Kiroki Mwidhembu, who writes that, makes a case and says that even if it was to be run professionally, the system still does not make sense. And that got me worried. I'm like, this looks like straight, like pen and paper, very easy mathematics business, that 1 + 1 should be 2, and that should be equals to profit. Let's start with, we are going into what's a business. Now, why something as obvious as an airline would not make sense.
Okay. I think aviation is not as obvious as we think it is. I worked in aviation for a number of years at Kenya Airways, and one of the things I did was government and industry affairs. And before you travel, or your airline is allowed to travel into any country, you have to sign something called a bilateral air service agreement. And you have to sign it with every country. So it's not a blanket agreement. So if I want to go to Tanzania, the Ministry of Transport in Kenya has to write to the Ministry of Transport in Tanzania, meet them, and sign a bilateral air service agreement. And it gives you rights to travel. So they have all the way from first freedom to seventh freedom rights, which basically means there are some rights for flying over the country. There are some rights for landing but not picking. There are some rights for landing and picking. There are some rights. So it's a very complex system, unfortunately. Secondly, the aviation sector has very heavy taxation. If you look at your ticket, the price of taxation takes a big chunk, and it's in different countries. So if you fly to Nigeria, there'll be tax on the ticket. If you fly to different countries, so the taxation in aviation is quite high. The other thing also is the sometimes unlevel playing field, because some airlines are running fully commercially, some airlines are supported by states. So it's a very different and dynamic sector. And if you look at Africa, for example, there's been a conversation that has gone on for years about giving open skies for Africa, meaning that we can fly freely in Africa. The way in, say, in Europe, you're able to fly, say, from Netherlands to Paris or Barcelona to Portugal at very competitive rates because they have open skies. But in Africa, we don't have open skies. You still have to have those agreements across all the different countries. Then it eventually brings up the cost of air travel. So air travel is not as simple as it seems, yet it can be such a catalyst for growth because it's a catalyst for tourism. So imagine if we could get a ticket to travel to Zanzibar, because Zanzibar is not far from Mombasa, but you'll probably pay double or triple the price to go to Zanzibar. But if you could get an affordable ticket, wouldn't you travel more? If you had an affordable ticket, say, to go to Lagos or to go to Ghana, you'd travel more. So aviation, if well supported, can be a catalyst for growth of tourism sector, even trade, because you're then able to go meet your business partners in another country, transport your products through the cargo if it's more affordable. So it's a sector that can also really catalyze growth in a country or a continent.
So for the case of Kenya Airways, for example, we are saying that they could be a victim of these factors.
Kenya Airways I will not comment on them because they're my former employer, but yeah, they're a victim of many factors. A big chunk, when things started turning around, they were competing against heavily funded airlines.
Heavily funded?
Yeah, heavily funded carriers that were getting oil for almost a throwaway price, and they are having, because they come from oil-producing countries. So you're competing against a very difficult playing field. Of course, also the differentiation between some of the carriers in the continent, what they pay, say, their staff. I know KQ has had a long-term discussion around their CBAs and trying to bring down the cost of of staff costs, which has led to a lot of back and forth there. So their costing is quite high also, and
So
they've been
heavily
unable to
funded.
bring it down. Yeah.
If we stick with the point of just, if we start with just heavily funded, it means that you would have an airline, which if they were just to rely on their ticket sales, despite the number of trips they would make, they would still not be profitable without the funding.
Without the subsidy, it's like they're subsidized. Yeah. Because for them, their cost of fuel is quite competitive. You're having to buy at market rates. They are an oil producing country, for example, but you're still competing. So the dynamics are many and different, but it doesn't discount the fact that KQ can do much better than it is doing.
Let me put another Kienyeji submission.
Yes.
If Kenya was to make a trade agreement, say for KQ, to balance the scales, you target an oil producing, if let's say oil is, fuel is one of the highest cost in the transport sector, in aviation, for example, you target a country that produces oil and do a branding arrangement that will just brand them Kenya Airways, but we use your terms to ferry the passengers, but we buy oil with your own prices. How Kienyeji is that submission?
There's definitely room for partnerships, and what airlines do is they have code share agreements where we can partner with another airline, have a code share, and those are routes that can make your airline more competitive. So there's room to see what partnership agreements could make sense for KQ for it to be able to become profitable again, because that's definitely a route. Because if you think about the time airlines have been able to grow, it's because you have code share agreements. You can reach a further market because you're partnering with another airline. Because on your own, you might not have 200 aircrafts in your fleet, but if you have partnership and code share agreements, you can then reach a wider market. So those are routes to grow aviation.
So these open skies agreements are available in Europe, but are not available in Africa.
Yeah, because Africa has been talking about Yamoussoukro declarations and many other declarations, but not actually opening the skies. Whereas the EU, for example, under the EU arrangement, they have open skies.
So now let's say there are no open skies in Africa, and let me be rude for a bit.
Yes.
What's the incentive to have an open sky to Lesotho, right? Yet we can have an open sky agreement. Okay, once you leave the African continent, you have the Europe area has an open sky agreement. Is it just an open sky agreement for the European countries, or it's an open sky agreement for the world, such that from Africa to the world, it's open, just from Africa to Africa is where the problem is?
No, it's only for their region. So the open skies are within the EU. So even for them, when they come to Africa, they face the same dilemma.
So who is the problem here? Because
I think the problem is, and even under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, one of the things we need to liberalize is aviation so that people can travel freely within the continent. But every country, I believe, is being territorial about it. So
what are we gatekeeping? Poverty. I would like to understand. I would like to understand.
I don't want to read into it, but yeah, we are gatekeeping something where we benefit more by reducing those barriers, but we don't see it. The same thing about trade. At the end of the day, we want free trade, but you'll still find non-tariff barriers. So countries will still be trying to. So it's that gatekeeping that sometimes the ability to see the bigger picture and to believe in it, that if we do this, and at the end of the day, we all benefit as a continent, if we can move more freely, if we can move more affordably within our continent, if there's free movement of people, goods, services, we all benefit. But if we're all creating our small cocoons,
it does not make sense.
You have a smaller market, so your tourism, you limit your tourism, you limit your manufacturing, you limit your trade. So eventually, the scale can't happen.
Okay. So now, when it comes to business now, having been in the corporate sector for a bit, right? Tumeongea cost of production, wage bill and stuff. Why is it there's a season we've seen mass layoffs of people? It means, and the talk of business is not doing well business as in, oh, biashara ni mbaya. We always complain. But to be fair, I've never heard of, hey, there's too much money now. Like, the economy is doing well. Seems like it's a human thing. So in your experience in the sector, what do we miss about the concept of business? For example, when we go back to airlines, like, to be fair, umesema, okay, KQ have their own problems, but they are competing with other factors. And to be fair to them, ukisema there are other airlines that are heavy funded, like the playing field is not level, that's an area that requires deeper research. But when you come back to the local sector of business, Kenya doesn't have businesses that can cross generations. Like, you can count a handful of companies that are companies that can stand the test of time. We are basically traders. Right? I wonder where we came up with the Association of Manufacturers. I wonder how many manufacturers do we have, right? What does this, first of all, how do we define business in an economy like Kenya then?
I think you speak to the issue of succession planning and how family businesses can move from one generation to another. And you're right that has been a challenge. And I know a number of people are trying to address it. USIU, for example, has programs where they work with family-owned businesses to see how they transition from one generation to the next. And in what format? Because in some cases, you'll find you, Dr. Kingori, you've started your manufacturing business, your kids grow up and they don't want to run it. So maybe you need to sell it or move it to someone else in the market. But there's also then what can you do if your family is keen on keeping the business to transition it successfully from generation to generation. And there are ways to do that. So it's even the level at which you make things official in business, the level at which your business is running beyond your own mind. Because a lot of times you know what you're doing it well, but it's not documented. There are no processes and systems that can outlive you. So building those things in business, I think, can make a big difference in how business transitions across generations. But also the issue of having a strong economy where businesses are able to stay because they are growing. Because the reality is, if the economy is strong, people are buying more, people are getting employed, you're then able to grow your businesses.
So you are able to grow your business. There has been a general question on the whole concept of business. I gave you an example of someone who produces things locally versus importation, right? If you came, let's say the Mtumba market, for example, it employs people.
It's a business.
It's a business.
Yeah, it is.
It employs people, but it stifles local manufacturing, right? Stifles local manufacturing. But it's also not possible for the local manufacturing to compete with products that have been imported from USA, China, and the rest, right? So inamaanisha, as far as employment is concerned in terms of manufacturing, in most sectors, it's a pipe dream. It's unachievable if we are to be realistic, okay? So then, beyond the conversation of business being exploitation, selling you something you don't know and hoping, someone actually said on this show that fools are reducing and it's making business very difficult, right? Away from that, business success to some extent, I can submit, is an illusion because opportunities are changing and we are living in a world of information and inaenda sana. So has the definition of business changed?
No, I think businesses have just been diversified and grown. Because what you're doing is a business. Before, 10 years ago, this might not have existed. So businesses have just grown depending on what's happening globally and in reality in the world.
So it could be some of us are stuck in the old ways of doing things, not catching up with the changing world.
Yeah, it could be that also.
It could be we are stuck in the idea of manufacturing, yet we should adapt thrift and importation and make margins.
I don't think we're stuck in the idea of manufacturing because I still think you do need to manufacture. The reality is, of course, there's a market Mutumba serves, because if you remember before secondhand came, there are people who maybe would not even have clothing because of that affordability of secondhand clothes. It also, of course, serves that issue of reusing rather than those clothes ending up in a landfill somewhere. Someone can wear them 3 or 4 or 5 times before they get discarded. So there's a place for that. But it doesn't discount the place of making new clothes, because people will still want new clothes. The thing is, though, how do you make them affordably so that you cannot necessarily sell at 20 shillings, because sometimes you can go to toy market and buy a t-shirt for 20 shillings. You can never produce at that. But there'll be a market for someone who wants a new t-shirt, but is okay to buy it as long as it's affordable. So that market always exists. So I don't think we can discount and say, close all your factories, stop producing, people will wear mtumba. No, there are people who will still be okay with buying a new product.
Then I think then that we redefine business is the identification of a market
Of your
that
market.
needs
Exactly.
what you are interested in producing.
You've spot on. And if that market exists, then do it. Then do it, because you're in business. Because it means someone will buy. Because there'll even be someone willing to buy a shoe worth 100,000. The market exists. It might be small, it might be a niche market, but it exists. There'll be a market of those who we want to go to toy and buy things there. And that's okay. So you just have to define what space you're playing in the market.
There's 3 people.
Yes.
You just recently joined that list.
Yes.
Not recently, like from my books. But
Which
there's
one is
Larry
that?
Mado, there's Polika Pigade, and there's you, who seem
What list is that?
who seem to never worry about the next job.
Wow.
Are you familiar with the concept of tamaking?
Am I familiar with the concept of tamaking?
Like those 3 people, the individuals.
Me, Larry, and Polycarp.
And
wow.
Polika Pigade
That's an amazing list to be on.
forms the confidence of. But I'll quit this one because something is cooking somewhere, and because where do you go from CEO of Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and then you quit, and then
I didn't quit. I resigned because I had another job. I got another job.
Oh Lord.
Quitting is like you leave and you don't.
That you do
Quitting,
it,
you leave before you get another job.
Kianani, that's exactly. So, unaona why I'm asking whether you're familiar with the phrase of tamaking.
I am.
Like you're resigning because you already have another job, and it has to be better than what yenye uko nayo already.
I'm very familiar. When I started my career, I tamaked. In fact, there's a time I was looking for, when I wanted to go, because I'm a lawyer by training. So after I finished School of Law and I was in a law firm, I said, I want to work in the corporate world. So I said, let me look for a job in the corporate world. And I looked for jobs, and there's a time I got a bank job for Cooperative Bank, and we were cutting checks in the basement and packaging them. You know those the shareholder checks. I did that for a month. So I have tamaked.
A month?
Yeah.
Oh dear Lord. I apologize for the person who wrote in our comments that he's been looking for a job since 1993.
Yeah, no, it's a reality that the job market is what it is, as you're saying.
Yes.
I must say I'm grateful to God, and 100%. I've been lucky to have jobs when I've looked for them. But I did tarmac after campus and look for a job.
No, I think the right word is, for the 3 of you, is jobs look for you. Because umesema, you had a job, so like, it's like a picky ponky for jobs.
Not necessarily.
It's
not just
thing.
the 3 of us. It's many
That's why
people.
We're having this conversation. It's the 3 of you. Top 3. So, if you don't mind, please introduce us to the fruit of the Holy Spirit that puts you in this position. Of course, one of them is how much you trust yourself. Because I watched a conversation between you and Nina Shaban.
Yeah.
And you said something about the level of trust you have in yourself. Of course, God first, but the level of trust you have in yourself.
Yeah.
In other sectors, if we were to go statistically and hesabu ya probability, for every you that makes it, and I apologize for using you in this context because there's a difference between how Larry moves. I know Larry personally, from how he moves versus how someone else moves.
Yeah.
Like there's journalism, and then there's and the other thing that you do.
Yeah.
There's Polika Pigade who utasikia yeye ni MD wa hapa, and then kidogo
Next
here next week. The grace
He's my friend actually.
For real.
Next week.
Next week he has something. So for the longest time, it has been the God of Larry Mado, the God of Polycarp Igathe, and in my list, you feature too.
Oh,
So
wow.
for you, I would like to believe that education presents a level playing field.
Yeah.
Right? So what's the difference between you who achieves academic excellence and understands the job market, and the next person who achieves academic excellence but they still can't hack it?
I think, first of all, thank you for that compliment, because I think it's a compliment. If God has been good to Larry, Polycarp, and I, and others, we are grateful. From what you've said, I'm big on careers and career paths.
Okay.
And that's why I started Career Site, which is a HR advisory and career services organization that I've been running for the last, I registered it actually in 2008, because when I got into the job market, I said, if someone can help me navigate this, it would be much easier. So I said, let me start a platform where when I make it, I'll come back and help other people figure their way through the job market. So that's what we do at Career Site. Just work with people, first of all, on their mindset. How do I, first of all, believe in myself? Because there's a big part of belief and having the vision of where you want to be. Because everything in the world is created twice. We had a speaker this week at Career Site who said that, but it's a quote from someone, that everything is created twice. In your mind, you must create it before it is built. So you must believe in this vision, for example. Even for you as Dr. Kingori, I'm sure when you set up the podcast 3 years ago, you believed in the vision. Even when no one else around you believed in it. So that's a big part of it. There's a part of identifying your purpose. What are you here in this world to do? And it's something, if you're clear about, it gives you a smoother path. So for me, I know my purpose is to make a difference to individuals, institutions, organizations, governments, to make a difference. And I do it in 3 ways in my head. I do it through mentorship and coaching. I do it through governance, sitting on boards, doing the different things I do, and through advisory. So those are the areas that I work on. So for me, what my belief is if you're able to understand yourself, be able to package your value, define it, it gives you an edge. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll get all the jobs you want, but at least it gives you an edge to move in the direction of your purpose. And it also enables you to come up with solutions when you're stuck. So for example, if there's no job in the job market, you might find a way to utilize your skills in a different way. So I don't know if that has answered you in any way, or I've confused you even more.
No, close. But I want us to separate it from, there's a meme I saw today of a guy with a bicycle. There's a bicycle and a towing rope tied to it.
Yes.
And he's trying to pull a lorry, a truck. And the caption is,
yes,
me after attending a motivation session.
Yes.
Right? That's believing in possibilities. Right? What's the difference between motivation, like the effect, the burn from motivation? You've attended a seminar, you've attended a session. Oh Lord, you're a millionaire next week, versus the understanding your purpose and going for it. And knowing that, yes, you're knocking on doors, you're working on something, you're building something, but you're not building in the wrong direction.
I think the main differentiator is action, taking action, because it's one thing to sit and believe in yourself, but if you don't do anything about it, for example, apply for the job, put in your LinkedIn profile, write your CV. You know, there's the part which you have to do for yourself. There's the joke that's told about a guy who wants to win the lottery and he prays to God every day, dear God, help me win the lottery. And 1 year later, God tells him, but you've not even bought a ticket. So there's a part that you have to play. So after the motivational talk, you have to go beyond that. You have to go and say, what action do I need to take? If it's a job, for example, do I need to go search and see where the jobs are? Do I need to send my CV? Do I need to reach out to people in my network who I can speak to? So action has to follow motivation and vision, because it can't happen on its own.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a career site.
Yes.
People reach out.
Yes.
People send their CVs.
Yes.
Right? What do you look for when you see a bunch of CVs? Is it a game of picky ponky? people can write anything in their CVs, which I think does not necessarily qualify them to do a job. These are questions about unemployable, unemployability, unemployment, right? People write their CVs. Someone's watching this and wondering, does this even work anymore? Like I sent my CV, right? People don't even apply for jobs because they have been discouraged, and for good reason. The idea of knowing people, when most calls for jobs are given out, it's just a formality. But you would rather work with someone you know in most cases. I'm looking at both sides.
Yeah.
The person who's discouraged from applying, and the person who knows that you'd rather, and this happens a lot. Hey, maze, tunatafuta msewa, we are looking for someone who can do this, and then you second someone and they do the job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's always someone qualified. So you would excuse the PR exercise of apply for this job, right? And let's assume you're going to your email to check the CVs that people have sent. What are the odds? And this is where I believe the God of Polycarp, you and Larry come in.
Wow.
That the HR, person working at HR will just open the email, open the CV, call you and get a job.
Okay. So I'll give a layered answer. First of all, what we do at Career Site is we work on mentorship. So we mentor different mentees, and we have different ways of doing it. So one of the things we do is we do 3 events. So we have something called Career Dialogues that we hold quarterly, where we have professionals in different fields and people who are interested in growing their careers. So they're all the way from entry level, mid-level, high level. And the people who attend are able to interact, talk about their journey, understand how people have grown, say, in the HR sector, in engineering, in different sectors. What does it take to grow in those sectors? So we do that once every quarter. And then we do something called webinars or masterclasses every month, where we have a speaker go into a topic. Like this week, we had Dr. Olofunso Somorin, who's from the Africa Development Bank, speaking about how you access opportunities in international organizations. So those are some of the things we do to just get that information out there, because a lot of the people who then attend say, oh my, I learned something I didn't know, or I made a connection I didn't have. I met someone in a network that I can reach out to. The other thing we do is we do a program that will be rolling out from March called Career Site Pathways. So we work with people 0 to 5 years and do a program called Launchpad. So as you're getting into your career, how do you position yourself? How do you identify your value? How do you find your way in the market? And really find a way to get into the job market. Some of it will include even your LinkedIn profile and things like that. And we partner with the Global Mentorship Institute, GMI, and work with universities also to get students in. Then we have something called Career Site Ascent. You're in the middle of your career, you want to grow, and you're trying to figure out, how do I position myself for management? What does it take to be recognized for the work that I do and everything? And then Career Site Summit, you are at the top of your career, you're looking at legacy, because it gets to a point you're looking at, what difference do I want to have been known to have made in the world? So we run programs like that. Then we also have a mentor capability program where we build the capability of people to mentor others. So I've said a lot of things, yeah. Okay. So those are some of the things Career Site does. So we don't necessarily receive CVs and vet them. That could be one of the things, but we enable people to be able to position themselves and grow in the market.
Okay, so let's go to an area you can have experience on.
Yes.
Like, unaona the areas that you have mentioned.
Yes.
Let's pick some of them.
Yes.
And look at the possibilities. Before we go to access to opportunities, let's say outside the country, there's a question where someone is looking for a job. I believe this is an area you have experience in, salary. This is a question most people fail at. How much money would you like to be paid?
The $1 million question.
The $1 million question.
Yes.
As someone who's been in these circles for a very long time, I once was on a table where someone was asked that question. I was on this other side. I don't even know why the HR thought it was a good idea to invite me for a session where they would ask someone that, and this is my friend. My friends, actually 2 of my friends came. And when they were asked the question, the answers they gave, I almost went under the table on phase 1. And
Why?
on phase 2, they were asked,
Yeah.
is this before or after tax? They said before tax.
Any.
Oh, Lord. I almost snitched in the meeting and I'm supposed to be on this other side.
Yeah.
How does one navigate
That
or
question?
how much
Do you want
would
to
you
earn?
like to be paid?
For me, there are two things. First of all, it's doing a research on what are the likely salaries for a role like that. And nowadays with technology, you can do it online. There are searches you can do that can tell you for this type of job, this is the range of salaries. You can ask around because sometimes you can know what is the range in this company. But for me, I normally would not answer that question directly because if you're selling your value, the company needs to, first of all, understand your value. And then secondly, they normally have a HR policy. So there's normally a range within which people are paid. So once they've understood your value, they will know within their policy, if this position sits in this grade and it normally starts here and ends here, this person should sit at the tail end because that's a value they bring. Or they should sit at the middle or they should sit somewhere else. So at the point of an interview, I prefer personally, I will not name a figure, but at the point of when you have understood my value and you're offering me a job, then we can negotiate a number.
So does this mean you'd work for free?
No, I wouldn't work for free. My point is I wouldn't, in an interview, I would say that the company has a HR policy and what they pay. So I will wait for them to offer me the job and I will negotiate at that point. Number two,
if after getting the job.
After they have chosen me. Because you see, in an interview, there are 10 people being interviewed. Yeah. And the company has a scale. Yeah, choose me first, then let's talk money. Because you have a paying scale. Secondly, if I've done a research and I know what that scale is, I will mention that.
The highest.
Yeah, because I'll know that your scale maybe ranges from 100,000 to 200,000.
Do you play
if I have done my research?
Do you play the Kikomba mind game of, the range is 200,000, so you start at 250?
At the point of negotiation when I've been offered the job, that's how you have to negotiate your salary. And you see a lot of times, because I have sat in positions where either I've been on a board or a CEO, the people who negotiate their salaries manage to push them up. And there are those who just accept them. Because normally HR, as you've said, might play the Gikomba. They'll give you because it's a range, they'll give you the lower part of the range. So you always have to negotiate. So those are some of the things, even a career site will do. How do you negotiate your salary? How do you push back? How do you, and the biggest culprits, even from what I have seen, unfortunately, in a number of cases, would be my gender, because they won't push back. I've seen a lot of gentlemen come in the middle of the year and tell me, I want to have a discussion about my salary, more than you would have.
In the African culture, that would be considered rude.
And unfortunately, if you negotiate and you show value, because you're not also just negotiating, you've demonstrated the value you're adding in the company. And if you're able to negotiate, you get a better deal.
It's not from a point of emotions that I deserve.
It's a value.
It's a point of value.
It's a value. It's a point of value.
And you must know.
You must know your value. And that's why one of the things we do is train people. How do you package your value? What is your value?
So you give us a hint, a taste of the career side.
How do you package your value?
Our audience, give us a taste. How do you negotiate? How do you package your value?
How you package your value is you look at your strengths. What are your strengths? Like you, how many years have you worked, for example?
I was with the Nation for 10 years.
Exactly. And what did you do? You did probably different roles.
Yes.
What competencies did you build? Can you define them? So we'll help you define these are the competencies you built. And then you'll have evidence to show. If, for example, you said you built the competency of communication, you'll have examples of things you did in Nation, definitely, right?
Yes.
So if you're able to package that and tell your story in an interview, you're selling your value. And then if you're able then to demonstrate it in the workplace, because we're also talking about negotiation once you have a job. If you go and say, for example, because of Kingori being in Nation, they were able to sell their newspaper much more because of the article you write that many readers are reading. Is that value?
It is.
It is value. I was listening to, what's this author? I'm forgetting his name, but he used to be a writer in The Nation, and he's written a book about grief. It's in my handbag.
Oyunga Pala.
Yes, Oyunga Pala.
Yes.
And he spoke about how when he started writing his article, how much he used to be paid. And then when he went and someone in Nation told him, you should check how many people read your article and what that has led to in the newspaper, he was able to go and negotiate for a big increment because of that. Because he took statistics and said, my article is the second most read article in the newspaper. The value I'm bringing you is X. Because of that, can you give me more? So I listened to his interview, and those are examples of where you demonstrate value and you can then negotiate for more.
So where most people go wrong from that submission you've made is negotiating from a point of how many children you have. And how much you're paying rent for.
Exactly. That's so true, yeah. So it's what are you adding to the business? If you're able to package that, the business will pay you for that.
So you can't negotiate from a point of emotion. It's not.
No. It's a point of, at the end of the day, it's numbers.
It's not about how much love the company has for you.
No, it's numbers. How much money are you making the company? How much value, how much impact are you having in the company?
And does every position have the opportunity to tabulate how much value they bring in terms of money?
I think it has a way to tabulate in terms of how much value you bring in terms of the role you've been put to play. And that's why you have KPIs. If, for example, you're always exceeding expectations in your performance, it means you're adding value to the company because your KPIs are linked to that value.
But hey, the Kenyan system, what if you go negotiate? You have the confidence and the value.
Yes.
And something tells you, the spirit of yourself, Larry, and Polycarp, yes, catches you and you decide to approach the boss with a salary increment proposal.
Yes.
Now that's the time they were looking for people to fire.
So you have to be strategic.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be strategic.
Or you also have to be strategic.
You don't also just go and, because if the company is making losses, then you go and approach.
So
that's the timing you want.
You want an
increment. So the timing is important. Profits. Yeah, when the company is growing, when the value to that growth can be linked to the value you've brought to the business. So you have to be strategic about when you go to ask for a salary. Because imagine a company like now, the company is making losses, then you go and say you want. So a lot more research into when is the right time to ask for an increment. What is the place of the business? Is there growth? Or can you demonstrate that some of the actions you take will lead to growth and that actually happens? Then you can either get a commission for doing it, you can get an increment, you can get a bonus. So there are many ways then to still be rewarded for that.
And does your company and site also train on the strategy of threatening that you're leaving?
Now, what if you threaten and you don't have another job? Then they accept your resignation.
But do you train? Do you train on that?
Yeah, on all aspects. Not
how
the strategy of threaten. No, not we don't train on how to threaten.
Like polite with corporate language.
No.
To see if the company loves you enough to keep you, to offer you a counter.
That's not safe. To threaten, to leave, no. The thing is, at the end of the day, rather than threaten, show your impact in the company, do your job, demonstrate your value. Then but you don't have to threaten anyone. Why do you want to threaten?
Value. That's a faster way. Like it would achieve better results.
Okay, not in my books, unfortunately. Threatening to leave, no.
No, as in, let's say I'm at Nation and I say, do you know Citizen are offering me twice what you're paying?
Are they actually offering you?
Oh, they have to actually offer.
Why would you go and threaten if you've not been offered?
The waters. Like, no risk, no reward.
You know, at the end of the day, I leave that to the individual. I wouldn't do it personally, and I wouldn't advise you to threaten that Citizen are offering you twice the salary if there's nothing.
It would be a demonstration of values. You may say value. I'm just trying to.
But the reality is, if you've said you're threatening and the offer doesn't exist, where is the value? Where is it? Yeah.
Also, it has to exist.
Yeah, it has to. It should exist.
If the value exists, if the value exists and you're given a counter offer, should you take it, or that's a HR strategy to?
There are pros and cons. There are pros and cons which you'd have to weigh. There are pros and cons for taking counter offers. There are people who take them. There are people who don't.
If you take them, you are doomed.
Sometimes you're not. Sometimes people take them and they succeed in the job. Sometimes people take them and that is used to hold you and eventually still fire you. So it depends. It depends. So you have to weigh. Yeah, you have to weigh the pros and cons.
Counteroffer could be what the company is willing to pay to buy time.
To buy time, exactly. Because now some companies read it as a signal. Hey, this one is not loyal. Let's just buy time and eventually kick him out. Some companies genuinely value you and they realize, hey, we are going to lose Dr. Kingori. and is the only PhD holder in the company. So they are willing now to pay you and keep you. So you see, it's a risk you're taking. You don't know whether you're going to be in the situation where they're holding you only for time to lapse and then eventually release you, or if they genuinely value you, and that counteroffer is now going to be the thing that makes them, when you stay, even give more value to you as an employee. Because it's worked both ways. I've seen people accept counteroffers and it goes well. There are people who've accepted counteroffers and it hasn't gone so well. Yeah, so you would have to weigh.
Okay.
You would have to weigh.
So on the matter of employability, then, Basi, what do we say? Because people have complained, I've expressed that this country does not have an unemployment problem. We have an unemployability problem.
Not necessarily in totality, because the jobs being created are not as many as the number of graduates we are churning out, for example.
Jobs being created.
Yes, but then there's also the other side of the coin where, for example, industry says that a lot of the people who come are not ready for, so they have to go and retrain them a lot more. So there's both sides to that coin. There's the reality that the number of jobs being created is not equivalent to the number of graduates leaving school. That's why there's unemployment. But there's also that reality that sometimes, yes, you will have those graduates, but if you give them the job, they don't meet the exact need of industry, and industry has to do a lot more retraining them. And that's why the system that we've been trying to adopt, where people have more industrial attachments and industrial experience, so that by the time you're actually going to the job market, you have more experience on the job. So like Germany has that thing they call the dual system, where you learn for one semester, the next one you're in industry. You learn, you're in industry. So you're sort of completely more matched for industry. So maybe that what you're talking about, that unemployability could actually be about that.
You've been in almost every sector, aviation, tourism, or HR, hizo zote, manufacturing. What has been your favorite industry to work in your experience? Hata sijataja legal and it's the main.
For me, my favorite thing is policy, and policy that cuts across everything. Because for me, policy is where you actually change systems. So whether it's aviation policy, where we are saying, let's do away with these closed skies and open the skies. How do we improve the policy to grow aviation? If it's tourism, it's saying, what policies can we put in place so that hoteliers can invest more? How do we build the tourism product in our country so that we have a diversified product? If it's manufacturing, how do we look at fiscal policy? How do we look at infrastructure? So for me, the cross-cutting theme, irrespective of the sector that I am passionate about, is policy. And that's why now this year I've set up Wakiaga and Company Advocates, so I've reopened it. And what we'll be focusing on is offering legal services, the traditional legal services, whether it's commercial, conveyancing, criminal law, and everything. But secondly, we'll be doing a lot of policy advisory work on how you can build policy and legislation that moves things forward. And then we also have a platform called Center for Policy Dialogue, where we can have convenings and conversations around policy, what needs to change, thought leadership, and all that. So for me, just to answer you, my cross-cutting is how do we make better policies to drive change? Because that's really, at the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road.
That's what we should have started with, but sadly we are coming to a close. Because I love policy. I love policy.
We'll come another day to just talk policy.
I now identify as a student of economics.
That's great.
But since I'm very curious, we can close with this.
Yes.
Is there any policy you've been involved with? Of course, I know that the results for policies take between 10 to 20 years, sometimes more, to see like results of like, this is what we did. Is there any policy decision you've been involved with that you're proud of to date?
I think for me, the work around the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because at the Association of Manufacturers, we were heavily involved in collecting inputs, looking at how the AFCFTA can work, because deep down I believe that if AFCFTA works, the impact it will have for the continent will be amazing. So
Africa
the design
Continental
free trade area agreement, yeah. So the
What's the
FCFTA.
mandate?
So the mandate, it's a trade agreement that brings together all the countries in Africa, a population of about 1.3 billion people, and the entire Africa continent. And what it's doing, it's driving free trade within Africa. So we are able, to produce and sell within the continent. So for me, that's one of the policies I think that is really transformational, which its implementation can make a really big difference. So over and above it being promulgated or put in place, how it's implemented is going to be really critical. So this season is the season where it's going into implementation. They've done some testing where some products have started moving around, and they're trying to adjust and ensure that the agreement is actually working. So I think that's an exciting season where we're in currently. Yeah.
It's interesting. We had Jimmy Wanjigi on our show at some point, and 1.3 billion is a very good number in terms of population. Like, hey, this is 1.3 billion strong. Then we have another submission on the same platform by Chude Gideonwo from Nigeria, and he says that we are wrong with the numbers because he says that numbers do not necessarily mean a market. Because we have to address the conversation of purchasing power.
That is true.
It could be 1.3 billion, but when you look at the gap between the wealth distribution in Africa, what will it be a market for? Avocados.
I agree with you, and that's why alongside growing the market, we have to grow our economies, because that purchasing power is critical. And I think there's a story told of someone who went to a country, two people who went to a country, and they were going there to sell shoes, and no one in the country was wearing shoes. So one of the guys went back home and said to his country, there's no market there, no one wears shoes. And the other guy said, there's a huge market there because no one wears shoes. So it depends on what side you look at it. It's perspective. The reality is, at the end of the day, 1.3 billion people have to eat, 1.3 billion people have to dress, 1.3 billion people have to go to school, those who are school-going age. So the market does exist, but what needs to be done then to turn this market into an actual market with purchasing power? And that then links back to the issue of creating sectors that can create jobs and opportunities to enable these people to have the purchasing power.
Okay. If your schedule allows, Aki, we can bet in advance that we'd like to go hard on the policy conversation.
That would be great.
But for today, asante sana for making time for us.
Yes.
I have enjoyed the conversation, and I trust that Wadau have too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kingori. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to coming again.
Me too.
Asante.
Karibu.
Okay.